one of the big criticisms I have of the Browns. There is such a focus on value, analytics, viewing players as assets and what we can do with those assets. I almost feel like they lose sight of the reality that you're bringing a human being to town who has a certain type of baggage through no fault of his own, although he leans into the celebrity, he leans into the social media stuff. I mean, he likes that. He's got a gregarious personality. What is that going to do to my team? What is that going to do to my quarterback room? What is that going to do to Dillon Gabriel, who is supposed to be the quarterback everyone's talking about locally as the potential future of the Cleveland Browns when in comes Shedeur Sanders? I feel like they never factor the human dynamics into these analytical decisions that they make. Is that an accurate assessment?
It's been fascinating to watch the Cleveland Browns become the epicenter of NFL discussion again. Because whether this team is winning or losing, whether they're pushing for the playoffs, or just trying to survive another rebuild, they always seem to find a way to grab headlines. And right now, the conversation begins and ends with the quarterback situation. A drama that feels as layered as anything we've seen in football in recent years. And while fans in Cleveland have endured decades of uncertainty under center, suddenly the future feels wide open with the arrival of Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, two rookies who bring totally different skill sets, totally different narratives, and completely different expectations. And the question we have to ask ourselves is this: how will the Browns handle this quarterback room? And what will it mean not only for this season, but for the next 5 to 10 years of this franchise? Because let's be real, Browns fans are passionate, they are loyal, they are hungry, and they are desperate for a quarterback who can change the trajectory of a franchise that has been plagued by instability for so long. So every move in Berea is magnified, every press conference is dissected, and every rumor becomes part of the daily conversation. And right now, it feels like the Browns' quarterback saga is less about stability and more about opportunity. An opportunity to see whether Shedeur Sanders can become the star that so many believe he is destined to be, or whether Dillon Gabriel's consistency, leadership, and football IQ give him a legitimate chance to outshine his more celebrated rookie teammate. Now, when you look at Shedeur Sanders, the hype is undeniable. The spotlight follows him everywhere, and for good reason, because this is not just Deion Sanders' son. This is a quarterback who has shown poise, arm strength, and confidence in ways that remind people of franchise passers who've changed entire organizations. But hype is a double-edged sword, isn't it? It raises expectations sky high before the player has even taken a snap in a regular season NFL game. And Browns fans, of all people, know the danger of falling in love with a prospect too quickly. Yet it's impossible to ignore the buzz around Shedeur. Impossible to ignore the way national media outlets keep circling back to him every time they mention the Browns. Because whether you turn on ESPN, NFL Network, or even local coverage, it always seems to come back to this idea. When will Shedeur Sanders take the field? And will he live up to the hype? And here's the tricky part. The Browns are coming off a brutal 3-14 season, and in that context, you'd think there'd be no hesitation about throwing a rookie quarterback into the fire. But the franchise has been burned before by rushing young quarterbacks. So the front office and coaching staff are balancing two competing instincts: the need to excite the fan base with fresh talent, and the discipline to protect that talent from being overwhelmed too soon. But here's where Dillon Gabriel enters the picture. Because if Shedeur represents the flash, the upside, the potential superstar energy, Dillon Gabriel represents something else entirely. Something steadier, something calmer, and maybe even something that aligns more closely with what this Browns team needs right now. Because when you study Gabriel's college career, what jumps off the page isn't just his production, but his decision-making, his processing speed, his ability to avoid costly mistakes. And when you think about the Browns' recent history with turnovers, with quarterbacks who have struggled to protect the football, you can understand why this front office and coaching staff might quietly be drawn to Gabriel, even if he doesn't make the same national headlines as Shedeur. Think about what Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, said when asked about the most important trait for an NFL quarterback: decision making. Not arm strength, not mobility, not even leadership, but decision making. And that just happens to be Gabriel's superpower, that almost computer like brain that allows him to process the game faster than defenders can react. And that's the kind of skill that doesn't always generate highlight reels, but does win football games. And isn't that what Browns fans want most of all? And let's not forget the context here, because Joe Flacco is still in the mix, holding down the starting job for now. But everyone knows he's a placeholder, a veteran presence meant to bridge the gap, not someone who can be the long-term solution. And when you look at his recent history, turnovers piling up in Indianapolis, inconsistency under pressure, you realize that his margin for error is razor thin. And if the Browns struggle out of the gate, it's only a matter of time before the calls grow louder for change. And that's where this quarterback room becomes fascinating, because the question isn't just who's next after Flacco, but in what order? Do you give Shedeur Sanders the ball because of his upside? Or do you lean on Dillon Gabriel to manage games, keep the offense on schedule, and buy time while Shedeur develops behind the scenes? This is where the Browns' 2 first-round picks next year also come into play, because the front office needs answers this season. They need to know whether Shedeur or Gabriel can be the guy, or whether they have to invest more draft capital into another quarterback. And that urgency is what makes every snap, every rep, every preseason drive feel monumental, because the stakes are sky high for a team that has been searching for decades. But let's pause for a second and really consider the dynamics between Shedeur and Gabriel, because competition can either divide a locker room or elevate it, and the way both of these young quarterbacks handle this process will tell us a lot about their makeup. Shedeur, with the spotlight on him since high school, has always carried the weight of expectations. But can he translate that confidence into NFL success without becoming reckless? Gabriel, often doubted because of his size, has always played with a chip on his shoulder. And does that underdog mentality give him the edge in preparation, in focus, in proving people wrong? When you put these two together in the same room, you create a fascinating contrast: the potential superstar and the potential stabilizer. And in many ways, the Browns' identity in 2024 will be shaped by which path they choose, because fans can live with growing pains if they believe the future is bright. But what they cannot endure is more uncertainty, more false hope, more wasted seasons. And of course, hovering over all of this is Deshaun Watson, the ghost in the room, the former franchise quarterback who is still under contract, still rehabbing, still posting videos that make him look ready, but still trapped in limbo on the physically unable to perform list. And this is where the Browns' situation goes from intriguing to downright messy. Because if Watson pushes to return and the team resists, it creates a power struggle unlike anything we've seen in the NFL. A scenario where the organization is almost hoping its $230 million man stays sidelined so they can evaluate the rookies, while the player himself is desperate to prove he's healthy, desperate to reclaim his career, and desperate not to be forgotten. That tension isn't going away, and at some point it will reach a boiling point, because if Watson really is healthy, can the Browns justify keeping him stashed away all season? Would he file a grievance? Would he force the team's hand? These are questions that add even more drama to an already combustible quarterback room. And if you're a Browns fan, you almost can't believe the layers of this story. The rookie competition, the veteran placeholder, the disgruntled star in limbo, all colliding in one season, one locker room, one franchise that always seems to find itself in the NFL spotlight, whether it wants it or not.